The World Food Programme is warning there's just 6 weeks until the whole of Gaza is living under famine conditions. It's urging Israel to allow immediate and daily deliveries of food. The WFP says famine is likely to occur by May in northern Gaza and will spread to the whole of the Strip by July. That's when the 3 famine thresholds, food insecurity, malnutrition and mortality, will all be passed. Humanitarian agencies have long complained that Israel hinders food and aid from entering the Strip, leading to man-made hunger.
Yeah, the situation in Gaza is extremely worrying. We all know that we are getting closer by the day to a famine situation. Malnutrition among children is spreading. Okay, we estimate 30% of children below age of 2 is now acutely malnourished or wasted. And 70% of the population in the north is facing catastrophic hunger. There is reasonable evidence that all 3 famine thresholds, food insecurity, malnutrition, and mortality, will be passed in the next 6 weeks.
Now, in the US, pro-Palestinian protests are taking place at college campuses across the country. Students at Berkeley, at the University of California, are among the latest to join. Activists say they'll sustain the Free Palestine camp until the university ends its connections to companies with ties to Israel. It follows days of mass arrests and other college protests in the US.
And many other Jewish students on this campus do believe that it is our duty to step up because of our Jewish values, because we are a people who's been in diaspora for so long, because we know what it feels like to be put into shtetls. We know what it feels like to be the victims of a genocide. And we believe that when we say never again, it means never again for anyone. And when we see this happening, even if it is people who are also Jews perpetrating it, especially because it is also Jews perpetrating it, it is our job to step in and make things right.
In New York, students are refusing to leave their camp at Columbia University despite threats police will clear the area. The demonstrators have been occupying a lawn on the Manhattan campus for several days, demanding that the university disclose any financial holdings that could support Israel's war on Gaza.
Students inside! Students across the country! With the students across the country! With the people of conscience around the world! With the people of conscience around the world! With our sisters and brothers in Gaza! And our sisters and brothers in Gaza! With our sisters and brothers of oppressed people across the world! With our sisters and brothers.
Well, for more on all those stories, I'm joined now by Arise international correspondent Faith Orr. Good to see you, Faith. Let's start with what we know and what we don't know about the hundreds of bodies found in those mass graves in hospitals in Gaza. What's the latest?
Well, we know today that Palestinian medics uncovered another 51 bodies from the grounds of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. Now, some of these bodies cannot be identified. Families are queuing up outside the grounds because, of course, so many people in Gaza are missing loved ones. They don't know if they're under the rubble, they don't know where their bodies are. So there are queues of people waiting to see these bodies to try and identify them. The medics say some of them are simply unidentifiable. They have been left in plastic bags in the ground simply to rot. Some children have been identified because of the clothes that they were wearing. More of the bodies uncovered today have apparently been found with their hands bound, some stripped naked, as we were reporting yesterday. This is the 4th grave that's been uncovered in the grounds of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where, of course, Israeli forces took it over for a number of weeks. And we know that work is still ongoing at Al-Shifa as well. Now, what's interesting today is that the international calls for an investigation are ramping up. The EU has joined the United Nations in demanding an impartial and independent investigation. Of course, that would require people other than the Israeli army to be able to access the site to carry out investigations. So we'll have to see if that happens yet, but certainly more international bodies demanding it.
Meanwhile, of course, Israel continuing its heavy bombardment of northern Gaza with heavy Palestinian casualties.
Exactly. Beit Lahia is one of the areas that we're seeing being shelled very, very intensely. Jabalia refugee camp as well as Al Nusayrat refugee camp and Al-Shati refugee camp. So we are seeing various places in Gaza being hit heavily today. Dozens more people killed in the past 24 hours. That's according to the medical services there in Gaza. It just seems like it is unrelenting. You know, it's 200 odd days of the war now, and Israel does not seem to be giving up on this anytime soon. Not just in Gaza, cross-border fire continuing too.
And of course, on the heels of that, there are reports of an imminent ground invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza. What are you hearing about that? We
are hearing that, that's Israeli media are describing it as imminent. We don't know when. We have heard from the Israeli military today. They've almost rolled back on it a little bit, not that it will happen, but how it will happen. They say it will be more targeted. The fear was, of course, that Israeli troops were just going to roll into Rafah. They say that there are several, that's where Hezbollah, Hamas has strongholds. They say there's at least 4 strongholds in Rafah. We have, interestingly, today seen Hamas release a video of one of the captives that it's holding. It's a 23-year-old. He is American Israeli. Now, he is pictured, we're not showing that video for obvious reasons, we don't show prisoners of war. He is pictured with his arm blown off. Now, we know that that happened during the October 7th attack. And he is very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, saying that they haven't done enough to rescue the captives. It is important to note, of course, that what he's saying, he isn't speaking freely. You know, he's under these conditions and being told what to say. But we do know that he is held captive. He says he's been underground for almost 200 days. So that dates the video to the past few days, fairly relatively recently. And it's something that Israel is calling psychological warfare, and one of the reasons that they say going into Rafah is so important. So they're not backing down on that. They are sending their troops back into Gaza. It looks like Rafah is on the cards for the Israeli military.
So clearly this war isn't going to end anytime soon. Let's turn to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Germany saying it'll resume funding the agency after pausing its support following Israeli allegations that some UNRWA staff in Gaza were members of terrorist groups, but no proof has been found.
No, exactly. So Israel had alleged that 12 members of UNRWA had actually taken part in the October 7th attacks and that hundreds of members were part of Hamas. France carried out an investigation and they didn't say it wasn't true. They said there simply isn't proof that that is true. And as a result of that, several countries, including Germany, are now resuming funding UNRWA, of course, an organisation which provides vital, life-saving support to people in Gaza. So that has changed today. Germany was one of the particularly staunch ones that said, no, we're cutting off ties until this. So the fact that Germany is back on board seems to be a positive sign for that organisation.
Meanwhile, of course, warnings that Gaza will be living under famine conditions in the next 6 weeks if deliveries of food aren't ramped up, and that warning is coming from the UN.
It is. Now, that is the whole of Gaza. It's important to note that the north of Gaza will be in famine within about a week, less than a week, by the start of May. We're already seeing children dying of starvation and of malnutrition. So it's not like things are fine now, but there's going to be famine in a week. Things are not fine. People are absolutely desperate for food and for medicine and supplies. But this warning from the World Food Programme and other United Nations agencies is quite dire, that the whole of the Strip, more than 2 million people under a famine, and a man-made famine. It's not like natural resources have been depleted. Aid is simply stopped from arriving. So that is why the agencies are demanding that Israel allow food to enter the Strip on a daily basis.
And there seem to be more flashpoints being created as a result of this war, with spreading pro-Palestinian protests across America. Just describe for us what you're hearing about what's happening there.
There have been hundreds of students arrested in campuses, particularly on the East Coast at Columbia, and we're also seeing protests in California at Berkeley. They are more in solidarity because they're seeing these other protests. They're not being shut down. Police have threatened to clear out the camps in Columbia, but they haven't done that. There was a deadline. That deadline has been extended. It's now 3 a.m. So we're going to wait and see what happens there. But what these protesters want is for their universities to cut ties with any companies that are tied to Israel, which of course is what the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, sanction movement has wanted for years. So they are pushing that agenda. They want them to step away from companies that provide any funding towards Israel and reveal which companies they are working with. And they say they're not going to shut down the camps until that happens.
Faith, thanks very much indeed. Very comprehensive assessment of developments around the Middle East there. Faith Orr is Arise International.